All right, thanks everybody for your patience. Welcome again. I am Ashley Sefferman. I'm Apptentive's head of content. And today we're super excited to share some tips on how product managers can understand their customers better. Our presenters today are Michael Fountain, Apptentive's Director of Product, and Sina Yeganeh, Apptentive's Senior Product Manager. Before we begin, I want to share a couple of general housekeeping notes. If you have anything to ask Michael and Sina about the topics that they're covering today, or just about customer communication tips in general, please submit those questions in the open-ended Q&A field in Zoom. For all of our listeners, you can see it in the bottom, at the center, at the bottom of your screen under Q&A. And we've saved quite a bit of time at the end of today's time together, so we definitely want to hear from you. You can also engage with us and with the panelists on Twitter using the hashtag #PMWebinar. It's throughout the deck if you forget, so you can pick it back up at any time. Or you can follow along on Twitter just using the @Apptentive account. We'll be live tweeting there. And we'll also be sharing links to all of the resources we're covering in the deck today. So with that, I'm excited to hand it over to Michael and Sina. Take it away.
All right, hello everybody.
Hello.
This is Michael.
And I'm Sina.
So you can recognize our voices. We are very happy and thankful for everyone that has taken time out of their day. We really appreciate that. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to share with you some of our learnings, some of our best practices, some of the things to watch out for. We're just really grateful. Thank you. So when we look at today's agenda, just a quick understanding of what my customers want and kind of unpacking that, really going deep into why do I want to do this? Why is that feedback important? And then talking about some of our best ways to gather feedback that we do here, talking to the customers on the phone, as well as what we enable for customers of Apptentive. And as Ashley said, we will definitely save some time for Q&A. We look forward to hearing from you. Your feedback is extremely valuable. So thank you in advance for some wonderful questions. And so to kick it off, I know we have a couple of folks that are already Apptentive customers. Again, thank you for joining. We absolutely have some tips to share with you as well. And if you're new to Apptentive, just a little bit about us. At our core, we are a customer feedback and experience platform. We help customer obsessed brands like you really interact with the right customer in the right place and at the right time. And you'll see why that's important soon. And this is really so you can better understand, engage, and maintain meaningful customer relationships at scale. And the scale part's important as you're starting to listen to more voices and you want to find the signal in the noise. And to date, we've hit over 500 million customer conversations across about 2 billion devices, Apptentive-enabled devices. And so we get a chance to help you listen to a lot of feedback from your customers.
Yeah.
Really exciting. Just a few of the brands that we work with. Hopefully we'll see some of you guys on here soon as well. How about enough of the marketing slides, and let's jump in, Sina.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so one thing I want to mention, it's just kind of awesome to be a product manager at a company that is trying to do products. And so we really care about customer feedback. So we want to dive really quickly into the why and then get straight to the how of some of our techniques that we like to use. So why is customer feedback important? To start off, I'm going to just share a couple of different surveys that we have done over the last couple of years. And one of the first ones is, why do customers leave a company? And the reason why this is important or interesting to us is if you look at the top, the bottom two there, the top 2 reasons why people leave the company is because either the customer doesn't believe you care about them or the customer is dissatisfied with your service. And both of those can directly be mitigated with getting good customer feedback.
Right.
Going into the next one, retention is a big deal, right? You want your customers to come into your app. You want them to use the app. You want it to be a daily touch point for many different reasons. But one of the big reasons is that people who interact with the app more just naturally will continue using the apps later, as you can see from the slide. And the last thing is that we'll talk a little bit about this feedback loop almost throughout our entire slide. If you let customers know that their voice is heard, they will become much more loyal. The figure we have on the slide here is 97% more loyal if their feedback has been implemented, and that kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah,
like
it does. I mean, it boils down to, I think really this feedback is about people, not users.
Yeah.
And we all want to know like, does my voice matter?
Yeah.
If I'm taking the time out of my day to give you feedback, are you listening? Is it going to a black box? How do I know?
Yeah.
Are there any follow-up touch points? So it's really important. I remember seeing this when I was looking at Apptentive over a year ago. It's like, wow, when I heard this, it really resonated with me. Like, we're talking to people, not users.
Yeah.
And when you take that mindset, you really get into, wait, all customers are important, not just that vocal minority. And I know if we probably pulled the room here, we'd probably see that a lot of folks, I know I've been guilty of this in the past, is really paying attention to the vocal minority, the folks that are really passionate about your brand and engaging with them because it's fun and it's exciting. They're giving you that feedback that you crave. And then the ones that are providing the negative feedback, you're like, oh, wait, we messed up. We missed an opportunity. But we really kind of missed the silent majority in the middle. And I think as a whole, there's an opportunity for us to figure out how to crack and talk to more people.
Yeah. And I mean, the slide shows, one-time user, 1-star review, deleted app.
Yep.
But this doesn't necessarily just mean about apps. This could be anything. This could be the web. This could be physical devices. It could be anything where you have, when you're really frustrated, you're like, oh my gosh, I hate this. I'm going to tweet about this. When you're really into it, same thing. You're like, this is awesome. I'm going to tweet about it. I'm going to donate. I'm going to do all sorts of crazy things. This applies across everything.
And I think that engagement curve is really fascinating once you really take a different mindset towards talking to people, observing the users, observing their journey. But really, when you get in, you start to talk, you can increase that engagement. And what we've seen with Apptentive-enabled apps and customer-obsessed brands, when you take that and you're thoughtful around how you engage with your customers, you can really awaken the silent majority here. And this curve is commonplace for our customers. And it's really cool to see over time, once they implement Apptentive, or they just take a more holistic approach around designing feedback, you will talk to more individuals. You'll give them an opportunity to actually have their voice heard. A lot of times the silent majority, it's not like they want to be quiet. They've just never been asked or approached in the right way.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like that feedback black box.
Yeah.
Last time they talked, they didn't do anything about it. So why should I do it again?
Yeah.
And so this is our opportunity to kind of really break that mold.
Yeah, I love this graph, especially because as you make that shift, as you reach out to more people, you have more loyal customers, positive feedback, et cetera. But that curve just exponentially boosts how many people you can talk to. It really opens up the ability to engage with a variety of different customers, which is great. So now we're going to move on to the how. So kind of the best ways that we like to gather feedback here. So the first thing I wanted to mention, so this is from Strategizer's value proposition design book, which I really enjoy. They have a great outline of kind of the business value versus the customer profile. And we'll dive deeper into the difference of, what's the different customer profiles that you can get to and how to ask the right questions there. But I just like this overview because it's saying that, as a business, you want to build product and services that are pain relievers as well as gain creators. Mm-hmm. And on the customer side, they have jobs that they have to do and want to do. And doing those jobs, it's extremely painful sometimes. Right. I mean, we've all been there where we've had to, comb through Excel spreadsheets and try to get just meaningful data. And so there's pain that they have, and as well as stuff that will make their lives easier, such as gains, things that will show them revenue, show them retention, show them anything that they want to gain. And when you build your products and you follow a customer profile as well, if you're very customer centric, you'll find that fit, which is really cool. And so diving deeper into how you can gain these customer insights in order to build that profile. Again, Strategizer has these awesome icons, and I just had to share them.
I love actually like the names.
Yeah.
Because I've seen myself wear so many of these hats in the past.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly, Michael. Like that's the thing that's great about this is that each of these has their pros and cons, their difficulty scale. And I'll talk briefly through each of these. So the data detective, for example, is static market research, being able to research the segment of the population, your customer. It's pretty easy to do, but it's not super meaningful because you're not able to actually engage deep with the customer on that. But you can at least get a baseline understanding.
Now you're talking to users, not people.
Exactly. Okay. And so the journalist is one that a lot of people, I'm sure a lot of you on the call have also done, which is interviews, surveys, getting in touch with people, getting in front of people, and being able to have that conversation. And I agree. I think that's one of the easiest one. It's a low barrier to entry. You can do this today. Like if you have a customer that you want to talk to, you have the ability to do so. So that's doing interviews and surveys. The anthropologist is observing your customer. So you can think of it as bringing a customer in and putting something in front of them and then not saying anything, just observing how they use the platform. Or, there's tools like Full Story, which allow you to see actually everything that the customer is doing. And we use that extensively here too.
I love watching Full Story. For me, it kind of opens up sometimes the delta between the desired outcome and somebody's clickstream.
Yeah, exactly.
And as we share this with engineering, it's really impactful to say, oh, wow, these little tweaks here or there can really improve that experience. And Full Story is a great tool if you haven't had a chance to use.
Yeah, I mean, it allows you, like, you can build a product, and then if no one actually ever clicks the button that you put there,
right.
The anthropologist is a great way to kind of see that. And you can tweak that. Either it's design, either it's functionality, and then you can follow it up with the journalist to see whether it's actually relieving a pain point.
Absolutely.
The impersonator is interesting. It's where you put yourself in the shoes of the customer. I like to liken it to eating your own dog food. We do that here. We do that here at Apptentive with our message center. In fact, all of our customer success stuff is going through our own dog food, which is great because that means that our customer success team is also now our customer.
Right.
And it's really easy to talk to them because they're literally right behind us. But it's really cool to eat your own dog food so you can actually see some of the pains and gains from the stuff that you're building. The co-creator one is kind of a high barrier to entry.
Kind of harder to do, right?
Yeah, it's usually with a smaller company or like a specific enterprise, plan or value prop. So this is where you actually work with someone to build something. So you're sitting next to them and you're quite literally building the product with them. There's a lot of pros and cons to that, but one of the big ones is that making sure that the space is close, so that way you can get the customer profile, wants and needs, and pretty instantaneously. Yeah. And then finally, the scientist is doing A/B testing, experimentation. Great for quantitative research. So being able to see, if I'm running an A/B test, that's statistically significant to
still
see.
Focusing on users, not people, but still valuable.
Yeah, extremely valuable. Right. I mean, I love the scientist. I would always pair it with one of the others. So I think the scientist, if you can get it, it's great quantitative. You still need that qualitative side.
Absolutely.
So anywho, I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper about the journalist because, as I mentioned, he's my favorite one. It's the easiest one.
Put your little mugshot right there.
I really like that icon. You'll see him around in these slides. So again, this is from Strategizer. We have a shared resources at the end, so you don't have to scribble it down or run to their website right away. So just a couple of tips when you're doing customer interviews. Adopt a beginner's mind. Every time you come to the interview, you want to make sure that you are, it doesn't matter what previous customers have said, but you want to make sure that you are adopting a beginner's mind and starting over. You want to listen more than you speak. You want to note reactions. There are plenty of times where we've done something and people are like, ooh, or, So definitely listen more than you speak and let the customer actually go through the exercise and after you ask a question. Getting facts, not opinions. So instead of saying, how does this make you feel? More so, how is this actually impacting? How much time do you spend on this? Getting concrete facts.
That's my favorite question. Time saved. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Asking the why question. Why is that important? What is this doing? That type of thing. Just following up with that. We always have like a solution usually that we're building towards when we have these customer interviews. I would mention and I'm guilty of this all the time, don't mention the solutions early, because then you're just kind of anchoring, you're introducing anchor bias, which is essentially, this is the solution. Do you like this? They're going to say yes every single time.
I think I've been guilty of that in the past as well. It's kind of, it slips in there sometimes. You're not cognizant about it.
Yeah.
But when you go in there with a solution mindset, you're like, all the feedback coming back gives you guidance, and it's that conversation that you have that will actually drive in and say, yes, this is working, and no, that's not working, and why.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally, I would follow up. They're spending time out of their day to give you valuable feedback. It's really nice to follow up. And as I mentioned, we're going to mention following up and closing that feedback loop.
Super bold follow up, because it's one of the most important pieces of letting people know their voice is heard. It's like, hey, I heard you. And there are a lot of different ways to do that, which we'll share. But follow up.
Yeah,
follow up.
Absolutely. So our favorite interview questions, how do you do that today? Give me an example of X, X being such like, how do you want to have this export? So, we often have people wanting to export their data. One of the most important questions is, give me an example of how you use this data. So that way we can make sure we actually build the right thing there. And then finally, of the problems discussed, how would you prioritize them? It's really good to take that step back, especially if you've introduced anchor bias, or if you've already kind of prescribed a bunch of solutions and the customer on the other side is like, all of this is great, that's not super helpful. So,
but we can address that with voting as a mechanism, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So like, especially for higher level stuff like roadmap, me and you have done this a couple of times where we, at Apptentive, we love hearts. And so we have like little heart stickies.
Little heart stickies and hearts, like little, what are they?
Notepads?
Slugs, the little wooden slugs.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We actually 3D printed a couple heart slugs. But the point is that you give these tokens or these kind of currency to the customer. We did this with a bunch of our customers in a room and at our CLS event, our Customer Love Summit, which we do yearly. Highly recommend everyone comes.
Absolutely.
But if you take those hearts and then you kind of vote on the priorities of how you think about things, and it really helps us actually gather feedback on our roadmap. It's really cool. Some things to avoid during the customer interview. So don't just jump in and assume persona. This is something I'm kind of guilty of, where you kind of want to just get right to the exciting bits.
Oh, yes.
But it's always important to introduce yourself and then have them introduce themselves so you can understand kind of the context of where this feedback is coming from.
Their role, I think the role in this is like super important. I recall I was in an interview 2 weeks ago, and I assumed the role of the person that I was speaking to. And as we went through the introduction stage, I was like, oh, wait, you're actually not the role that I was speaking to. I was able to shift the questions to be more appropriate, though. So it's not like we wasted the time, but I was able to adjust on the fly. And I think that's that first, signal that you get into an interview. Absolutely make sure you know that persona that you're speaking with.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the second thing here is anchor bias, which we've already talked about quite a little bit. So don't prescribe the solution before listening. Leading questions. This is another one that happens quite a lot. If you have like a prototype or something that you're putting in front of the customer, don't say stuff like, hey, did you notice the new shiny, clicking thing? What you want to do is and along with the other part, interrupting and correcting, you want to hear what they say, even if it's wrong. So put it in front of them and then give them time. And that leads to some uncomfortable silences, like, 20 to 30 seconds where you're just.
So how long do you sit in silence?
So I like to wait. I like to wait about like 20 to 30 seconds because usually, you can see what they're doing with the prototype.
Right.
Ideally, you have like a full story, which we'll go through actually later. We have like an Envision mock-up that we have as part of a discussion topic later on. You can see their mouse. You can see what they're clicking on. That gives you really good insight on what's going on. After about 20 to 30 seconds, though, that's when I start saying, can you let me know what you're thinking?
Right.
So that way you can even get better feedback. But definitely don't want to correct them. No one's wrong. You're testing to see whether your design.
Feedback.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You're testing to see what's going to happen. So just make sure you're listening to what they say. And I'll leave it at that for some of our techniques.
So there's a lot of the how and the why, and it's really interesting when you want to make it easy for customers to talk to you. This is really where it starts. And when we look at a feedback loop and designing a feedback loop, it can really start as simple as this. It's do you love our company? Do you love our brand? Do you love this app? did you love this experience? And you can craft that question. And there are so many possibilities that come out of this that you can then create your feedback journey, if you will. And we call it designing that feedback loop. And so if you are interested or need to drive more positive reviews or positive ratings, or you want to get external, encourage them to share their voice externally, you can absolutely do that once you know that they have positive sentiment towards you. And the reverse is true. It's like, oh wait, we've missed an opportunity. Whatever we were thinking they would love, they didn't. So now we need to find out why. And we kind of close that feedback loop by saying, hey, tell us a little bit more. What was that experience like? Why did you not like it? So, starting with a simple question is really at the root of how we can make it easy. And there's some other tools that we'll talk about as well. But when we get into like, what if the customer comes to you and says, and we've presented the love dialogue, we don't absolutely always have to go to a ratings and review. We can always say, hey, great, thank you. Let's be thoughtful and mindful about, that positive jump for joy, if you will, and find out a little bit more. What was the feature you loved the most, or what were the collection of features that you really, really like in this app? And then I think one of the most powerful things is why.
Yeah.
Give me why. And you can do this in couple of different mechanisms. This is just one way to do it within Apptentive. And
yeah, I just want to jump in and just say that it's just kind of cool to, it's like progressive disclosure, right?
Yes.
You ask that simple low barrier question, and we'll get into when to ask that question. But the point is that it's low barrier to entry. You either hit yes or no. And then from that, you can be like, oh, we're so sorry that we wronged you. We absolutely didn't do the right thing here. Please let us know why. And again, another low barrier to entry, quick pulse of what's going on. And that's kind of how you can get to that silent majority there.
I think that's great. I think when we have that big bell curve at the beginning, you have all the folks that are the silent majority in the beginning or in the middle there. It's like, what is that one thing that's going to get them to say, yes, this is actually pretty good, or no, I'm not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And then from there, you can kind of dig deeper, and it's that next level down there. You're like, oh, wow, this is actually going to work.
Yeah.
And when we look at the feedback loop in general, it really only works if you make it simple. And when we look at designing feedback, we have an effective feedback loop. And when we look at this feedback loop, kind of imagine if we did start with the love dialogue, and one of our objectives was rating and reviews. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe we wanted to actually run that micro survey and to get a little feedback in real time. And we take that feedback to product, and that's us again. See, there's our little icon logo. We can run that customer interview, or we can follow up and get more information from them that feeds our product roadmap, that feeds our engineering backlog. And then what's most important is as we deliver the features or the enhancements or the new release, or just the acknowledgement of, hey, this is now ready for you, and we can follow up with you again. It's super impactful to actually have this feedback loop and really let the customer know their voice was heard.
Yeah, I can't stress we heard your feedback note. Like, nothing makes you feel more validated than when you're like, hey, I like your app, but I really wish that I could do X. And then like a couple months later you get, or like even a week later or days later, you get a note and an update to the app. And it says, hey, we heard your feedback. We fixed the problem that you had. Thanks for letting us know about it. Even like, here's like a coupon, or here's like, some other stuff like to incentivize better feedback.
Right.
It's really cool. Quick note, what is a micro survey?
A micro survey is not a 20-page survey.
Okay.
It's really something where you're like, I have a very specific piece of information that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
You typically like, tell me what you love the best, what you don't love the best, or maybe make some choices. And then that final question is typically something like, why did you make that choice? But when you're on a mobile device, you don't have a lot of real estate. You don't have a lot of time typically to go page to page to page to page. I've exited too many surveys that are multi-page. And so micro surveys are just kind of a great small format to actually unlock that silent majority, because you want to start with that little simple question. Hey, did you love this experience? From there, you can fork into learning more. and you can do it in bite-sized bits.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I mean, nothing's more frustrating than when you just completed some like a purchase or something like that, and then you have like a 4-page paragraph essay that you have to write. So I mean, I really like that. That's cool.
So in-app surveys, really just you're going to leverage them to really do learning, informing, and educating. So we talked about you're going to learn about app issues or maybe app successes. Use that information to inform your product roadmap. Also educate your stakeholders. We do a lot of text analysis, and our insights tool kind of rolls up a lot of this free text. So yes, you can export it and you can do your own analysis, but we provide a lot of that as well. And you can use these reports to actually educate other stakeholders in the business, whether it's going direct feedback to engineering to help understand, this is why this feature is so important. This is what the customers are saying about it. Or maybe you're going to senior leadership and you're saying, hey, these are the overall themes that we're starting to hear from the app. The changes that we've made, a lot of positive sentiment is coming from that. And so you can leverage these microservices in so many different ways. It's really an important tool for all of us.
Yeah. And I mean, free text. We have a tool that does free text analysis. Free text is really difficult to parse because if you have 1 million customers and they all have different things, it's hard to parse that information. But it's really cool to have. There are tools out there, including ours, that really just analyzes that free text, and then you can kind of leverage those things to the top.
Yes.
Because free text is a really important piece of feedback.
So when we look at making feedback seamless to the experience, you don't want it to be abrupt. And so you've heard us say designing feedback, right? So you're going to spend a ton of time working with engineering in partnership, in concert, really trying to design your product. You need to be thoughtful and really design your feedback loop as well. And when you pair those two things together, the experience is just phenomenal for the customers. You'll hear more from the, I would say the silent majority are going to lift. You'll absolutely continue to hear from the vocal minority, and that's great. You'll be able to understand who are your fans and who are your opportunities, those that aren't your fans. But then the silent majority will really kind of speak up, which is good. And so it's all about the timing. It's a lot about the placement of that to really make it to work in your advantage, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I really like the bullet point. I think it's a little harsh, but I think it's very true. You're failing your customer if you neglect designing your feedback.
Yes.
And I think that that's really true. If you're not, just like anything else that you're designing in your product, if you're not taking consideration to your customer, why would they spend their time giving you feedback? Feedback is extremely valuable. You need to make sure that you design feedback as a first-class citizen to anything that you're designing.
Yeah.
And you can tell whether you're getting good feedback based on your metrics for success for getting feedback, which is response rate or volume.
Right.
So just wanted to mention that.
I think what's interesting, I like to call this well-designed feedback interrupters. Because I'm in the flow of doing something in my app and I'm being interrupted. And it's kind of like I'm driving to the mall or I'm driving to dinner with my family. All of a sudden I'm on my way. Somebody pulls the emergency brake, says, hey, wait, how was that experience? I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Right. And so you've interrupted what I was trying to accomplish in your app by forcing me to give feedback, which most likely I'm not going to, or it's going to be negative.
Or just immediately tap the no thanks.
No thank you. And then you lose the ability to talk to that silent majority. These are just a few examples that we've seen.
That one on the right, I mean, it even has like a passive aggressive, nope, sorry, never, bye. I mean, I'm going to tap that because, but you're trying to guilt me into not tapping, but I mean, it's the content itself, but also, as you mentioned, if you're in the middle of buying something and the feedback pop-up modal that refuses to let you go anywhere pops up, that makes it really difficult for you to want to give feedback.
And so, don't design interrupters, really be thoughtful, really humanize that feedback experience. So when you're trying to say, hey, when should I actually ask the Love Dialogue question, if that's going to be our intro into getting this feedback loop started, should I do that in the middle of an order funnel? No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. Should I do that if I've only just downloaded the app and maybe use it for a few minutes? probably a bad time to do that. So you want to be thoughtful. Once they've gained the value of the experience of the app or the brand, that's an appropriate time to ask.
Yeah.
And you can use those tools and mechanisms, within Apptentive to be thoughtful on how you target these customers.
Yep.
And then when you do, use language that's friendly, that's personalized, whether you're just asking for, in the middle here, just a simple hello. And it makes all the difference in the world. I love on the right, it's just like, thank you, this gratitude, just a little bit here. But also being mindful of people's time. Sometimes they don't have time to give feedback. So the no thanks, graceful exit are always good to go.
Yeah.
These are just really, really good ways to design a feedback loop and give that personalized experience. Remember, it's people, not users.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, I wanted to talk through a little bit more of the tactical how to run an MVE, which is a minimum viable experiment. That's something that I really enjoy doing. For those of you who don't know what an MVE is, it's something that's before the MVP. So an MVP is supposed to test the hypothesis. You're trying to put out the minimum thing that's going to relieve pain, as well as test the hypothesis to see whether it's valuable. An MVE is an extremely rough prototype that has 0 to very little minimal engineering required. And the whole point of it is that you're trying to get immediate feedback of what's going to come out of your hypothesis. The reason why this is cool is because you can do this anytime. You can stop after this webinar, just grab something, an idea that you have, and you can put it in front of customers and actually get immediate feedback. I say no to minimal engineering. Some of you might have technical background, some of you not. It doesn't matter. The point is that you can ask engineering, or you can do a script yourself to get the information that's required in order to do work for your customer. I think the best way to describe this, though, is actually through an example.
Yeah, let's show them.
All right, so we have an idea in our own platform where we have a lot of our customers who want to be able to see multiple versions of their app, or sorry, not multiple versions, but different apps that they have in their organization all in one page. Or, if you have an iOS app and an Android app, you want to be able to compare those two.
You want to see both of them together.
Yeah, exactly. And so we wanted to build something that was just a page where you can actually see all of your apps side by side and be able to compare the values there. This is from our very, very, very initial design. You have, as you can tell, there's a lot of stuff. Even our designer was like, this is a lot of stuff, but it's all the things that we could display. And we were like, okay, you know what? Let's do an MVE. Let's grab this information.
We could doesn't mean we should, right? I mean,
exactly.
We can absolutely do this, but should we?
Yeah, exactly. And so I threw together a Python script, and we had a customer interview, and I used their real data. And what we did is we actually in Vision, yeah, there's the customer interview logo. This is actually from a real customer interview. We changed the names, and we've changed the values a bit. But we put this in front of our customer, and we were like, hey, how does this look? Like, this is your actual data. This is something you could get on a daily basis. Anytime you go to the dashboard, what is your feedback on this? And we got a lot of feedback on it, which is really cool.
And was this, this wasn't code outside of just getting some initial data. This was built in Vision, right? So,
yeah.
So no engineering effort outside of you wore a little engineering hat because you have a technical background, but we could have easily gone to engineering or run some queries to get these data points ourselves.
Yeah.
And then the presentation of this was done without engineering needing to do anything.
Yeah.
Which was
I mean, we kept them involved so they can understand whether we didn't want to build the impossible, obviously.
Right.
And so we shared with them what we wanted to show, and they're like, this is really cool. We can actually gather feedback here. And then from that feedback, the final product actually changed, as you can tell, from 4 different areas where, we added an export, we introduced international data. One of our customers was like, this is great, but I have no idea whether this is US only or, worldwide. If you look back in the previous one, we had check marks next to the interactions, and people were like, what does that mean? Like, I'm good to go? Like, what? And so we added, a label, interactions integrated, et cetera. It's a really cool way to go from idea to feedback to straight to being able to actually design and finalize a product here.
What's interesting about sharing this with you guys is the initial feedback for, hey, I have a lot of apps and I want to see them on a single page, or I want a roll-up view, came from customer feedback. And as Sina, you were talking with engineering about trying to figure out how to solve this problem. There are so many different ways to go.
Yeah.
So we just carried that feedback loop forward with the interviews, and through the interviews, we really fine-tuned and honed in on what exactly it was the minimum experience needed to actually drive value.
Yeah.
And that was like completing that loop, which was, felt great for everybody.
And I mean, you can't, and you also can't get some of this information from just a simple survey, right?
Right.
Which is, I mean, that's the value for this, as well as you get people excited. I mean, I think we have 4 or 5 interviews before we actually started putting out like a beta for this. You get people pumped and excited. They're like, "Can I get this like now, like right now?" And I'm like,
if
"No."
This was here, I would get the enable button right now.
Exactly.
I love that.
And then the last thing I was going to mention is that an MBE doesn't have to be just straight up computer. You can do an MBE for almost anything. At one point, we were doing an iOS experiment, and I literally took a sheet of paper and drew a couple of different things, and I was like, how would you move these things? And so you just slap the paper down in front of the customer, and you're like, pretend this is your iOS screen or your Android screen. What would you do? So you can actually find very creative ways to do MBEs, and you'll get valuable feedback. So I'm happy to be able to share that. The last thing I wanted to mention here, this is kind of outside the scope of how to get feedback or understand your customer. But just to close the loop on, now that you've gotten all this valuable information, what do you do? We use a feature prioritization matrix. This establishes, to be very clear, a baseline score, which will help us understand, where the pains are for our customers. And then from that, we can derive themes and build our roadmap. We share this in our shared resources. We pulled this from...
it is from... let me make sure I get the name right, 280 Group.
Yeah.
And it started out as a template. We made it our own, which is, I encourage everyone to do something similar. There are a lot of tools out here to do this. We found that this helped bring a lot of stakeholders from across the business. So we have CS leadership and marketing leadership and sales as well. And we pull everybody together, and then we can listen to what's most important to them as these features have come through. And a lot of the features that come through for us from our Apptentive customers are already well, I would say, groomed through a great customer success experience. And then once we see them on product, we can then dive deeper with the individual customers, some follow-up questions, get more information. And then we look at it holistically for the company. Like, is this great for a business initiative? Is this a great pain reliever? Is this a great value driver? Once we do get that baseline score, as Sina mentioned, product can leverage that as we look at planning. And so like right now we're doing 2019 planning, and part of that is we aggregate a lot of these into groups of themes that drive tremendous value.
Yeah.
And so this is just one tool we wanted to share, is kind of like, check it out. You might have your own tool, which is great. The resources, we'll have a link to this for you.
Yeah. And I mean, it's just that going back to that value map and customer profile, right?
Yeah.
You want to build something, customer wants something, let's make that match. And, as I mentioned, again, we keep saying baseline. That means that it doesn't necessarily mean that the topmost thing is the thing we're going to do. It's the fact that we are able to then go further and ask our customers. Yes. And we also put level of effort as something that we added in there too. So that way we can at least get kind of a ballpark understanding of how engineering views these.
Yep.
Cool.
So as we wrap up, in summary, these are the takeaways that we really want you to listen and provide feedback internally, follow up with us as well. It's every customer voice matters. No matter where they are in their customer journey, their voice matters. You just need to make it easy for them to provide feedback. And the way you do that is be thoughtful at how you humanize it, how you target it, how you decide when and where that feedback should appear. So basically, you're designing that feedback, which is critical to making this work. As Sina said, use MVEs, those minimum viable experiments, to really go one level deeper from all of that feedback you're getting. So you're talking with quite a few customers, sometimes a small handful. If you're at an event like our Customer Love Summit, we had an opportunity to talk to a lot of customers all at once. And then we use different techniques, like whether it was voting or just screen sharing or even the napkin, which I love. And then product, we want to take that feedback and we want to prioritize it so we can help it drive our roadmap and really trying to help us figure out what we should do next, what's most impactful what levers do we have to pull here? And last but not least, absolutely let them know their voice was heard. And there's so many different ways to do this, from notes that you can follow up and retargeting, down to just giving them credits and release notes as well. So there's a lot of ways for you to let the customer know their voice was heard.
Cool. And yeah, as I mentioned, here's our shared resource list. Some of the things that both me and Michael have enjoyed and read. You can see bits and pieces of some of this in there. Product management is very much, sharing resources.
The resources today for product managers, I wish we would have had 5 years ago.
Exactly.
The books that have been available, I would say in the last 12 months, have blown my mind.
Yeah.
I mean, the Inspired book, absolutely love.
Yeah.
The Value Prop Design book, I heard from you, which I'm like, oh wow, I can't wait to read this one.
I mean, it's like a 50-page comic book strip of like very quickly how to do some of the stuff that we've described. So, and then obviously both me and Michael, we love to hear feedback. So if you guys have any thoughts, and speaking of that, I was just going to say that we want to get into Q&A. So we'll go ahead and say thank you very much for all of your time, and we'll launch right into Q&A.
Awesome. That was really great, both of you. Thank you so much. I feel like I personally learned a lot, so that was awesome. And we also had a ton of listener engagement throughout your talk, so that's always really exciting. So just as a quick reminder for listeners, before we jump into Q&A, there were a lot of great resources included in the deck we just went through, and we've shared all of them on our @Apptentive Twitter channel. So if you can grab any of the links that we discussed there immediately. We'll also share this recording shortly in case there's anything you'd like to circle back to, but if you need it now, it is right there. So that said, let's get into some of our listener questions in our final few minutes. Okay, so this first question is from Tim Fuller. And Tim asks, do you recommend iRise or InVision for quick prototyping changes, or is there another tool you think is better?
Cool. Yeah. So we mentioned we personally have used InVision. I haven't used iRise. Have you?
I have not used iRise.
Okay.
InVision here was a tool that was already in place when we joined. I've done as much as balsamic to create my customer remember of that tool. I used that a lot in my prior role. Paper napkins always. So I don't know much about HighRise to give you the compare and contrast, but I know that we've used InVision most recently.
So I highly recommend InVision. I've used it across a bunch of companies. I very much just enjoy the quick prototyping nature, but you can also do very much the ability to kind of follow up and see what people are clicking as they're going through it, as well as prototype pretty quickly in it. I err on the side of, whatever design's super comfortable with.
Sure.
I know that our designers here also use Sketch, and Sketch has prototyping tools too, as well as plugins that let you do that. So really it just kind of depends on what the team can do. I personally really like anything that has to do with whatever fulfills your objective, right? For a lot of the time for MVEs, I want to see what they're doing, what they're thinking, what they're clicking, etc. I like to record them. I like to watch them. And of course, with their permission, I say, hey, there's no wrong answer. Do you mind if we record? And everyone's usually fine with it. And then whatever tool is necessary for us to be able to fulfill those objectives. That's what I love.
It's a good point. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks so much. All right, our next question comes from Ramon Cardozo, and Ramon is actually joining us all the way from Brazil. So, wow, thank you. What time is it in Brazil right now? That's great. So Ramon would like to know, how do you know the ideal frequency to ask the love question? So our love dialogue.
Thank you, Ramon, for joining us from Brazil, first of all. I would say that you don't want to do it every day. That's too much, right? You don't want to do it when you're interrupting a workflow. But ideally, you want to get that initial baseline. So what's the first time they've actually achieved value from your product or service? And that's critical. So as you've designed the product, you know the goals and then the product. And once they've achieved that goal, you want to get that baseline. Do you love the product or service that you have? And then from there, the frequency can change. You can ask after the next app release if you're on an app cycle. You can ask, what we encourage in terms of best practices is sometimes about 3 times a year. It's about every 180-ish days. And that will give you a pulse over time. You don't have to be tied to that, but it's really about what are your objectives? How often are you making app changes and updates? And are you rolling out features all the time? Then you probably want to have a higher touch. If you have features less frequently, you probably want to have a lower touch, but you absolutely do not want to have 0 touch, and you do not want to interrupt until they've attained value.
Yeah, I think that to summarize, I mean, it's best time when they're a new customer, and then three-ish times a year is ideal. That's also somewhat in line with Android and iOS's recommendation for when to ask for ratings.
When you get into the ratings and review prompts, right?
You know, it's there's research behind why those are the right times to do it. So you can time it along that as well. So that way you can actually, if they're giving glowing feedback and you want them to be able to express that in terms of a star rating or a review on the app itself,
right,
that's also a good time to do that. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So much has changed specifically with reviews over the last couple of years that, very important to know. Okay, so our next question is from Maya Oded. She is interested in understanding, how do you hear the voice of the less engaged?
It's a good question. How do you hear the voice of the less engaged? You make it easy for them to provide feedback by providing a way that's non-threatening, non-interrupting, being thoughtful and mindful in how you ask. Will you hear from 100% of every customer? No, probably not, right? I think that's unrealistic. But you should absolutely be able to hear from a lot more customers than the vocal minority.
Yeah.
And the vocal minority are great to listen to as well, but don't let those folks be the only folks that drive your product feedback.
Yeah.
You really got to, as you leverage the love dialogue, is just one way to do it. And if you leverage it successfully, you will find more people will engage with you. And then I think the important thing to actually get that feedback is, like, what do you do next? Whether they've said, yes, we love you, or they've said, no, they don't. What do you do next? What do you want to know next?
Yeah.
And it's like that micro survey has an opportunity to shine. It's like, what did you love the best? That's great. Oh, we're sorry. Where did we miss the ball? What was the feature that, didn't hit it for you?
Yeah.
And then just a simple follow-up free text form. Why?
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more. That right there, you'll find, will be so enlightening. And then you can leverage Attentive's tools if you want to use our insights tool, or you can take the data out and look at it in your own analysis tools. And that really opens it up.
Yeah. I mean, just taking a step back, think about everything every service that you're talking with today. How many people actually ask you for feedback?
Right.
I mean, I play a lot of video games, and video games don't ever ask you what your feedback is, mostly because a lot of people are strongly opinionated, but that's still a voice, right? And you still need to listen to that voice. I have plenty of discussions with my game dev friends who are struggling with this, because they're like, anything we do, people are angry with us about. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't listen,
Sure.
right? And so I guess the number one thing that I would say is, first and foremost, ask the question, ask the love dialogue question. Do you love us? Or any question really, just be able to be receptive to feedback first and foremost. And you'll see the the silent majority.
Yes.
You'll definitely decrease that. And I think that's a really big point. And then the second part of it was, as Michael mentioned, the low barrier to entry.
Right.
If you're asking them to write a 4-paragraph essay, they're not going to do that. But if you ask them a simple question, do you love us? Yes or no? That's the right approach. And you'll definitely see engagement go way higher because of that.
And I think as a profession, product managers, we can all do better here, right? This is an opportunity for us to all level up our game, and every customer or brand that we interact with, you want to have your voice heard. And I think if everybody leveled themselves up a little bit, it would make it a lot easier to provide feedback, ultimately would result in a lot better experience all around. So I think collectively, we all need to do better.
Yeah.
Right?
Just ask the question.
Yes. Yes. Agreed. All the things. I'm just shaking my head yes over here. Okay. Our next question is from Salison, and they would like to know if we could please comment on the use of NPS in collecting and responding to feedback collected during asking for an NPS score.
It's a good question. I've done some ancillary research on NPS recently, and you can definitely leverage NPS, but it shouldn't be your only measure of customer happiness.
Yeah.
I think it's a good measure of customer retention when it's done on a cadence. The questions, there's a lot of like love and hate around that question in general, right?
Yeah.
It's a very polarizing topic depending upon who you talk to.
I think that's true.
But it's a good baseline metric. It's benchmarkable. It's become a standard. It's probably here to stay, whether we love it or not, but it doesn't measure customer happiness. And I think that's the difference between what we do and what NPS provides. Now, within Apptentive, we absolutely allow you to do NPS, right? We have the templates to make it possible for you to ask those surveys. There's nothing wrong with doing that. But then you've got an entire customer journey, and how happy are you through that customer journey? And our love dialogue can really give you that, basically the happiness metric, whether they were a fan on the first time you asked and then they switched and you're like, oh, wait, why? What happened? Yeah. Why did you switch? We have the ability to go in and dig in and find out why. And then when you win them back, you can celebrate and thank them, and and you can do more of what you're doing well, and you can fix the things that maybe you aren't doing so well.
Yeah, it's like the polarizing thing about that is that, it's a binary choice when it comes down to an NPS score. You're taking 7+ and you're like, this is good, and everything else is no. So it's very similar, I think, but just like a little bit more deceptive than, just asking the yes/no question. And there's other ways to do NPS, doing ancillary research.
Right.
That's the baseline NPS score. If you do NPS plus, where you actually have the neutral in there, that changes kind of the opinion there. But I think the thing is that NPS score, as you mentioned, is really good for ongoing, understanding, but it's definitely not a gauge, a strong gauge. You're just understanding whether someone likes you or not. You're not going that one step further of actually engaging and listening and going further. And so if you were to use the NPS score, which I don't specifically recommend for trying to gather feedback immediately, I would at least follow it up with a survey or a deeper understanding of what's going on, because an NPS score by itself will not give you the feedback that you need. It'll just give you kind of like a baseline metric of what you care about there. So.
Mm-hmm. Yes, NPS is so tried and true, but there's so much lacking from the results.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. Well, so much more to say on that, that's for sure. Okay, but we have only a few minutes left, so we're going to keep going. So our next question is from Cindy Kretzman. Cindy, she might be a customer. She says, cool to see the current version ratings as MVE. Her question is, when and how can we get to see this?
Cool. Yeah. So that product has been released, and that's feedback right there.
Yes.
So we'd love to go through the product and show you specifically. You can see it in a couple of different places. We have our app dashboard where we have the current rating.
Right.
We also have the see all apps on the navigation on the left side, which will show you all your apps, which will show you the current rating. So you should have that available. If you have any questions, though, feel free to reach out and we can guide you in the right place. But yeah, so that was an MVE that was successful. We tested a hypothesis. A lot of people liked it, and we were able to promote that into production. So
I think the interesting thing about your question is, are you ever done? Right? I didn't mean to make
right, that's great.
Are we really ever done? And no, we're not. It's always about continuous improvement, right? And it's about the feedback loop. And so after rolling that feature out, doing a follow-up set of interviews or a follow-up set of surveys, there's an opportunity to improve maybe the awareness of it or the location of it. And we won't stop until we continue to make those iterations.
Yeah. And so, speaking of which, it's outside the scope of what this webinar was about, which was understanding your customer, but we do have a very specific kind of spec writing exercise where we go from MVP. Then we have something called Charter, which is kind of the 1.0 version, which is, now we're moving to making sure that our engineering team is made sure that there's no tech debt, as well as we're still doing that feedback loop where we're asking customers, all right, now you got the thing in production, what do you think? And that influences the next version of that product.
Absolutely.
And so, as Michael was saying, it's just continuous improvement is very important. Just like engineering has continuous integration, continuous deployment, we have continuous, education and understanding and feedback gathering.
Great. Okay, so we are going to get through 2 final questions. This one should be a quick one. It's from Jan Makura. Jan would like to know, would it be possible to share the feature prioritization matrix template?
Yeah, so in this slide, wrong way. In this slide we have, which we'll share with everyone, we have the feature priority matrix template right here on this slide, which we can send out. If you want specifics of things that would be really helpful or kind of guidance on how we use it, you can feel free to reach out to us and we'd be more than happy to talk about it and share with it.
And I'd say the key to that is just make it your own. And what I mean by that is the link is actually an Excel spreadsheet. So we pulled it into Google Sheets and then we applied some of our own weighting to it based off of our business priorities. So the link that you have there is the root Google Sheet. Feel free. There's also a great tutorial on how to use it. I think 280 Group does a good job. And it's one of their free templates that they provide.
It's a free template.
It's a free template from them.
Absolutely. Take a look at it. Have any questions, feel free to reach out. We'd love to talk about it.
Great. And in the meantime, we did share that on Twitter as well. Okay. So so you can see that there immediately.
Cool.
All right. So one final question. This question is also from Tim Fuller, but I think this is super crucial and we have so much curiosity in our community around this all the time. So I definitely want to ask, even though he's getting 2 questions. So the second question Tim would like to know is, when making changes opposite of a customer opinion, how do you deal with the fallout?
Cool. Thanks, Tim, for asking. This is a really tough question because there are going to be times where, especially, and as I mentioned earlier, my friends in the gaming industry, this is a really tough question for them because they're like, if we roll out something and it's against popular opinion, but it's the right thing to do, the question first is it the right thing to do? But then the second thing is, there is a reason why you're doing something that is opposite to popular opinion. And there's different ways to kind of figure out what's the right thing to do. For me, I think communication is the biggest point. There's often a reason why you're doing something. And as long as you're honest and clear with your customers about why you're doing stuff, I think that's a big deal. And leveraging these feedback mechanisms, like being able to take a survey after they've experienced it for a while, being flexible to be like, we're just trying this out, being attentive to being able to send a note that says, hey, we know that you're having trouble with this thing, but this is the reason why we're trying it. Click here to see a link that explains it. I think we're all people here, right? And that's the thing, is that it's not just users, or it's just
I think the last thing you hit on was actually really important, which is proactive notifications of change. Right?
Yeah,
change is hard for everybody.
Yep.
How fast, how well you adapt depends upon how long you've been entrenched in the way that you've gotten accustomed to do things.
Yeah.
And typically that change is really abrupt right away, and it fades over time as you kind of forget the old way and there's a new way.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to speed that up is through proactive notes. And we've seen quite a few customers actually deploy that as a mechanism to say, hey, we just changed this feature. Here's why we did it.
Yeah.
Here's where the old feature is, or maybe here's some additional reading to understand what we learned in the process. And that just kind of further creates transparency that I think, Sina, you were really hitting in on, is changes in a vacuum will probably end up bad.
Yeah.
Right. So don't live in a vacuum.
Couple of companies have fell dramatically over the last year because of a very strong UI change. I'm hinting towards a certain company, but I mean, the point is that like, you know, you don't go to a news outlet and say your customers are idiots for not understanding design. Right. The better thing to do is, you know, like, again, it's just making sure that you're proactive with your communication. There's a reason why we're doing this.
Yep.
And I know for a fact, as an app developer myself, I know for a fact that whenever if I change design, it usually, people are upset because it's like, hey, I used to have a workflow, now you've changed my workflow. Why did you change my workflow? Your benefit to changing the design or whatever needs to be explained, or sometimes like shown through value, to be like, oh, I changed this design because it actually makes it so the job that you're trying to do is actually 1 click instead of 5. You know, it's actually better, but I didn't do a good job of explaining it. So being proactive and making sure that you are clear about why you're making the design change and what the objectives are. And then also being flexible to say, hey, we're also evaluating this. You know, 2 weeks from now, send out a survey, see whether it's still a polarizing issue, and move from there.
Remember, people, not users.
Yeah, I mean, it's the collaboration thing. So I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough question. I love it. It really depends on the situation, but just be honest and treat people like people.
Love it.
People, not users. Transparency is key. Yes to all those things. Okay, well, we are out of time for today. We have a few questions that we weren't able to get to. We will make sure if you ask something that we didn't respond to today, that we get you the answer, and we will be following up. Thank you so much, Sina and Michael. This was great. So much fun.
A lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
All right, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and look out for the recording of today's talk in your inbox soon.